The Spanish monks, they brought peaches over, and they were disseminated throughout the state, and when later settlers came, there were so many peach trees that they thought it was a native fruit, and so it became the peach state.
The first Georgia Peach Festival was held in 1986, and today draws a crowd of 10,000 people. One thing they come for is what Fort Valley claims is the largest peach cobbler in the world. Propane tanks actually fuel burners beneath the giant 11 by 5 foot pan in front of the Peach County Courthouse. Chef Rich Bennett and his crew start putting the dessert together at 5 a.m. for a 2 p.m. unveiling.
We divided the mixture into 6 parts in trash cans, clean trash cans, and mixed it up with boat oars and rakes.
That mix includes 90 pounds of butter, 150 pounds of both flour and sugar, 32 gallons of milk, and 75 gallons of fresh peaches from Lane Packing Company.
This is a first for me. I get to try for the very first time the world's largest peach cobbler. Ooh, fresh out of the pan.
Very hot.
Oh, it's hot. It's good. Rich, I think you've done something right.
The crew used 5-gallon buckets to dish out individual servings to a hungry crowd.
What do you think of that?
I just wonder how they were able to make it so big. It's really good.
The cobbler is real good. And of course I'm wondering who figured the ingredients and how much to put of peaches and how much of this and that and the other, but they did a good job.
It's clear Georgia is proud of its peaches, and Peach County is pleased it can grow the fruit that gave this state its nickname.
It may be hard to believe, but the peach is actually a member of the rose family. And there's a bit of romance behind the name of one of the best-known kind of peaches. In 1870, a Georgia peach farmer developed a new variety on his farm in Marshallville. He decided to name it in honor of his wife, and the Alberta peach was born.
Well, Georgia may be synonymous with the peach, but you'll find its most impassioned advocate in California's San Joaquin Valley. You'll now meet a farmer who's become the poet laureate of peaches and turned some of our sweetest childhood memories into a best-selling book.
Here's an excerpt from Epitaph for a Peach. Suncrest is one of the last remaining truly juicy peaches. When you wash that treasure under a stream of cooling water, your fingertips instinctively search for that gushy side of the fruit. Your mouth waters in anticipation. You lean over the sink to make sure you don't drip on yourself. Then you sink your teeth into the flesh, and the juice trickles down your cheeks and dangles on your chin. This is a real bite, a primal act, a magical sensory celebration announcing summer has arrived. Well, I was born on this farm, and my dad and my mom had come back from the relocation camps after World War II. My grandparents immigrated from Japan at the turn of the century and were farm workers in this area. Decided, like a lot of farm kids, I didn't want to stay, so I ran off to college and I ended up coming back. I began to listen to my neighbors because that's where I was going to learn a lot about how to farm and understanding the things that they've learned through generations. And I began to hear their stories. And the stories attracted me, and that's probably one of the reasons why I farm. I farm for stories. I think every year, every peach has a story in it. So I ended up writing a book about this wonderful peach, and then a couple more books about the farm. I think our family is realizing that we are becoming such an anomaly. A very small percentage of people live on the land, actually work the land, and work it as a family. So in that sense, you could think of ourselves as being very rare. I like to think of ourselves as being special. My daughter says she'd like to come back and take over the farm.
I didn't really realize how much of a farm girl I really am until I got to UC Berkeley, and I realized that walking on sidewalks was a new event for me, because out here I walk barefoot on dirt all the time. I love learning and love studying, but I know for a fact that I want to come back and work with my dad. He was the one who taught me how to drive a tractor. He was the one who taught me how to drive a forklift. Last summer I learned how to weld. And all of those little father-daughter moments are just so tied to being on the farm. I can't imagine ever abandoning this place or this way of life.
Wonderfully, there's a home for these kind of heirloom variety peaches, and also a home and audience for stories that I write about the land, about family on the land. I'm not sure what the farm will look like 10, 20 years from now. I would like to think stories still have a place. Following a farm disaster, like a storm that destroys a year's work, a joke starts to circulate in the farm community, farmer to farmer, farm to farm. Like good humor, it makes all of us smile even just a little as we grapple with the grief from a disaster. The story goes like this. They did an autopsy on an old farmer, and when they opened him up, they found he was full of next years. I feel like an old farmer full of next years.
Well, I will tell you firsthand, these plump, juicy, delicious peaches, they do bring back some of my sweetest childhood summer memories, and I can't wait to bite into one. So we want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll come along with us again next time when we discover more great farms, families, and their fascinating stories in America's heartland. I'm Paul Ryan, and I will see you next time.
To learn more about this edition of America's Heartland, or to give us your feedback, visit americasheartland.org.
You can see it in the eyes of every woman and man in America's heartland, living close to the land. There's a love for the country and a pride in the brand in America's heartland, living close to the land.
VOA presents the following National Geographic program as we continue to explore the world around us.
The next story that I proposed was, photographing one of the most pristine places in the Indian Ocean. It's this tiny atoll called Basasta, India. This is all there is at high tide. That is it. It's this incredible place. It's in the cyclone belt, and of course, since you can't see it at high tide, there's shipwrecks everywhere. And the outer perimeter creates this almost bathtub-like lagoon. And this is a nursery ground for Galapagos sharks. Sharks and healthy reefs kind of go together because the sharks govern the ratio of reef fish, of algae, of sea urchins, and all those things. So sharks are critical for healthy coral reefs, and these reefs were in incredible condition. They're curious. They're very, very curious. I have always known Galapagos as being very, very night active, so I also wanted to photograph them at night. And this is inside the lagoon on one of the coral reefs. And one of the most magical, 2 hours of my life, just watching these sharks like, moths to a flame. They're just kind of swimming in and swimming out. These images of this experience really just, gave me hope again that even though we've impacted our oceans in so many places, every time you get sort of despair overcomes you, Mother Nature just kind of taps you on your shoulder and goes, I'm still around, you just have to go there. And this is one of those places, etched into my memory forever, Basasta, India, and Europa Atoll.
VOA, exploring the world around us.
Thomas Alva Edison is considered America's greatest inventor. He's best known for creating the first long-lasting electric light bulb in 1879, but he also invented and perfected more than 1,000 other products. His favorite, historians say, was the phonograph, the first machine that could capture sound and play it back. This 1888 recording is believed to be the earliest existing recording of Thomas Edison's voice. Edison was also one of the first inventors of the motion picture camera.
I'm here at the Thomas Edison National Historical Park in New Jersey, where behind me is a 3-story lab that helped produce some of Edison's most famous inventions.
National Parks traveler Micah Meyer spent a day immersing himself in Edison history at the inventor's home and laboratory.
It is a fitting place to take a video on a cell phone. This phone and the electricity that charges it wouldn't exist.
Much of the site has been kept intact.
He had this amazing library there that kept all of his records. And then you went right next door in the factory, everything was in-house. So they were designing, they were building, they were shipping, all from this one location.
With 400,000 artifacts and over 5 million pages of documents, the site looks very much as it did when Edison was working here. Also on the property is the Black Maria, considered to be the world's first building constructed solely for the production of movies.
It was designed on a pivot and turn system so that it could capture the direct sunlight as easily as possible to make the films.
Edison's early attempts at movie making helped set the stage for the remarkable achievements that have been made in filmmaking since then, and made possible just about every form of digital media that permeates modern culture today. Julie Daawo, VOA News, Washington.
That's just one of the vicious cycles that are spinning faster as the Arctic warms. Another is happening out on the ice.
I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
Coach called me over and he was like, hey, you got a pretty good arm, why don't you join the team?
The frozen Arctic is thawing, and as it thaws, it's coming to life. It's not just the longer growing season. Underground, the Arctic permafrost is retreating, says ecologist Ross Virginia.
More of what was previously frozen soil, locked away from biology, essentially inert, is now becoming biologically alive.
And like all living things, soil breathes. Scientists are measuring the gases exhaled by the bacteria and fungi living in the growing layer of soil. They are finding the microbes are producing worrying amounts of carbon dioxide and methane.
And those are potent greenhouse gases. So then the atmosphere warms more, and we get more thaw of the permafrost, more gases being emitted, which leads to more warming.
That's just one of the vicious cycles that are spinning faster as the Arctic warms. Another is happening out on the ice, says atmospheric scientist Jim McQuaid.
Bright snow reflects sunlight, so it doesn't melt as quick. But as soon as you start darkening the snow, the speed of this melting increases.
And the Greenland ice sheet is getting darker. Though it seems isolated from the rest of the world, McQuaid says desert dust, industrial soot, and smoke from forest fires blow in from far away. McQuaid is part of a team studying how these darkening particles interact with microbes growing on the ice. They produce dark pigments to shield themselves from the unrelenting sun. McQuaid says the microbes, dust, and soot form into globs that create pockmarks in the ice.
They're darker, they'll start to warm up and then melt into the snow or the ice. And as one melts, and then you get another one melts, and then they'll start joining together, so you get this water forming.
The more water that melts, the more the microbes can grow, leading to more melting. Scientists do not yet know how big an impact these self-sustaining cycles will have. But Ross Virginia says researchers have been caught off guard.
We've been underestimating rates of change, and it's because we're now understanding these feedbacks that we really need to dig into and understand how physical change affects biology, how biology drives physical change.
Change that's happening faster and faster. In 2015, at the historic Paris summit, world leaders pledged to take steps to avoid that change. Here are the primary goals of the Paris Climate Accord. Hold warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Establish national targets to cut emissions. Reach net zero emissions between 2050 and 2100. Review national goals every 5 years. Create mechanisms to mitigate damage caused by climate change. Produce a non-binding financial agreement to help developing countries cut emissions. The U.S. is responsible for 14% of the global total of the world's greenhouse gases. By pulling out, the U.S. joins Syria as the only countries not participating in the agreement. This month in Bonn, Germany, UN negotiators will be back, working out the details of how to cut emissions of planet-warming gases. It's the first conference since President Donald Trump said the United States would withdraw from the agreement. That leaves questions about the direction of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. And the answer is not straightforward. Donald Trump campaigned for president, promising to put struggling coal miners back to work. Since taking office, he has worked to undo policies aimed at cutting greenhouse gas emissions from coal-fired power plants and elsewhere.
Keystone Pipeline.
That includes a move to undo the Obama administration's regulations targeting electricity generation, known as the Clean Power Plan. But the impact on U.S. emissions is likely to be minimal, says George Washington University's Amit Ronen.
We're still going to meet the goals of the Clean Power Plan in most states, even if it's withdrawn, just because we're substituting so much natural gas and renewables for coal.
Coal-fired power plants are shutting down across the country. Utilities are switching to cheaper, cleaner natural gas. And renewable sources, like wind and solar, are booming. Prices have plummeted. Renewables compete with fossil fuels on price in many places. But other Trump administration actions may still tip the balance for coal. A trade case will soon give the president authority to put tariffs on imported solar panels, which is nearly all of them. That could cost the industry 88,000 jobs. Experts note that many states and cities are stepping up efforts to cut greenhouse gases, even as the federal government is pulling back. So federal tariffs would not kill the renewables industry, says Rhodium Group analyst John Larson.
Certainly adds costs and might stifle solar development, but overall, the overall clean energy picture, I think, doesn't get hit too hard. The other more dangerous situation is the DOE action.
The DOE, the Department of Energy, has proposed paying coal and nuclear plants more than other sources for their electricity. Ultimately, experts say the Trump administration has limited powers to save the coal industry. However, while coal's decline is helping to cut greenhouse gas emissions, experts say they are not falling fast enough to avoid the worst of climate change. They also say the human footprint on climate change is immense. At least 1 in 10 people globally live near the coast in a low-lying area. As the population increases and sea level rises, their homes are increasingly being threatened. The countries with the most people at risk include the United States, China, India, and Bangladesh, and Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam and Indonesia. My colleague Elizabeth Lee explains.
From floods to droughts, recent years have seen more of these extreme weather events.
There is no doubt that part of this is climate change. Winters are warmer. Snowpacks come later, they leave earlier. Droughts have tended to be more intense, especially here in California.
Scientists say while climate change cannot be blamed for every extreme weather event, it is definitely a factor.
It changes the odds. So the odds of heat waves are greater, the odds of stronger hurricanes are greater, the odds of more intense droughts and floods are greater.
That means communities in low-lying areas close to the coast worldwide are at a greater risk of the devastating effects of extreme weather.
We're living in a warmer world. We're living in a melting world. And of course, the unequivocal evidence is that sea levels are rising. We're living risky. We're living too close to the coast.
Scientists say although the Earth's climate thousands of years,
we've never seen this much change over 100 years. And so the thing that worries me the most is not the next 1,000 years or the next ice age, but the next 100 years.
It's not natural. If it weren't for human activities, the world, under natural causes like changes in the sun and volcanoes, would have actually cooled slightly in recent decades. Warming is due to human activities, primarily to carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping gases and particles that mankind has put into the atmosphere.
Rising sea levels and more extreme weather have impacts that go beyond floods.
We have greater disease, spread of disease. We have deteriorating air quality because of higher temperatures.
The biggest impacts of sea level rise on
global agriculture must also adapt to a changing world. As seen in this film produced by the Aquarium of the Pacific, sea level rise in Bangladesh is causing more salinity in the soil. Farmers can no longer plant their regular crops and have switched to grains more resilient to salinity. Some countries are working to mitigate the effects of climate change. In Indonesia, American and Indonesian scientists and students are working to restore seagrass beds. Seagrass protects the shore from storm surges and helps take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
We can't make it go away instantly. It takes a long time, but we can act to reduce the severity of climate change.
Scientists say the solution is reducing the amount of fossil fuels and increasing the use of renewable energies. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News, Los Angeles.
I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
I'm Patsy Widapuswara. I've been at VOA for 12 years. So almost 20 years ago, my friends and I from college, we started the first Indonesian Debating Society. We started debating internationally, and I found out that I liked it, and I'm pretty good at it. Debating paved the way for me to become a journalist because it was in one of these competitions where one of the judges, who's a big television producer in Indonesia, she saw me and then tracked me down after I graduated and offered me a job, and the rest is history. Between debating and journalism, there's a lot of similarity. You have to be able to look at an issue from different angles and then absorb the information and present it in the most effective manner. I like it here because I can be independent. Back home there is censorship, first from the government, and then there's commercial pressures for ratings. But here all we need to rely on is the VOA Charter, and I love my job. I can't imagine being anything other than a journalist.
My name's Carla Babb, and I work the Pentagon beat. That access helps me to do better stories. Every day it's my responsibility to collect all of the defense news. It keeps our VOA viewers informed. I get to travel all across the globe. Anything that's defense related and how to protect and keep people safe, that's where I'll go. So it's never a dull moment at the Pentagon. My name is Carla Babb. This is my beat.
Election night 1 year ago, Donald Trump stuns the world with a presidential victory few saw coming.
To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
At his inauguration, Trump made a pledge to the working class voters who largely fueled his victory.
Politicians prospered, but the jobs left and the factories closed. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
Trump's election signified a seismic shift in U.S. politics, says strategist John Feary.
I think the Republican base voter is now a Trump voter, and they see any effort to stymie President Trump from the Republicans as a direct assault on them.
But Trump's presidency got off to a rocky start with a massive protest march and a dispute over the size of his inaugural crowd, through spokesman Sean Spicer.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
I, Neil M. Gorsuch, do solemnly swear.
The president scored an early success with the confirmation of Justice Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court.
The stock market just hit an all-time record high.
And he gets high marks for his handling of the economy, a booming stock market, and military gains against Islamic State. But Trump and his Republican allies suffered a setback with the defeat of a health care bill in the Senate.
The ayes are 49, the nays are 51. The motion is not agreed to.
That left the president's agenda effectively stalled, says Alan Lichtman.
No ruling party with unified control of government has ever come up as empty as the Trump administration and the Republicans who control the Congress of the United States.
The president's Twitter habit provided plenty of distractions, as did some controversial remarks following violent protests in Charlottesville, Virginia.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
The turmoil and lack of success in Congress have kept Trump's poll ratings low, says Larry Sabato.
A large majority of Americans now believe that Donald Trump is doing a poor job as president. They disapprove of his job performance, and it's going down rather than up.
But Trump's election-style rallies and tweets have kept his base fired up and ensured loyalty among most Republicans in Congress, says Matthew Dalek.
Because he has this pretty tight hold on 35-38%, makes it very hard for the Republicans who control Congress to openly challenge him.
Yet recent criminal indictments in the Russia probe also threaten to cast a shadow over the White House, adding to the uncertainty of where Trump's presidency is headed, says Sabato.
So can he turn it around? Yes. Can he get reelected? Sure. Now, sometimes the hard part's getting elected the first time. But he's making it difficult on himself, both for passing his agenda and for keeping the Congress in Republican hands and for getting reelected.
Trump's election was a defining moment in U.S. politics, but its impact on the country and the world remains an open question. Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
Did you vote today?
From the liberal college student to the conservative West Virginia coal miner,
The election, the future for the coal industry.
Jeff Deutschmann's documentary 11-8-16 follows American voters during Election Day last November. He showcases 16 out of the 50 voters his team of filmmakers had followed that day across the United States.
We wanted it to be a broad cross-section of individuals that represented, diversity geographically, demographically, and ideologically.
11-8-16 shows that people voted on issues they felt affected them personally. The film also shows that most believed media projections that Hillary Clinton was going to win.
The election will be over by 9 o'clock. They'll call it by 9:30, and everything will be peaceful and wonderful. What if it goes the other way? What? Not going to go the other way. No way. Mark it down.
Jeff Deutschmann says his documentary reveals deep cultural divisions in American society the media missed.
So I think it's important not to get stuck in the echo chambers that we all live in. We surround ourselves with people virtually and in real life that are like-minded, and I understand that. I do it as much as anyone. But I think it's really important to try and regularly confront the fact of how big this country is, and to allow that vastness to inform the decisions that we make about how we vote and, you know, how we speak.
The film does not take sides. We get invested in these 16 characters who, despite their political leanings, make compelling arguments based on their circumstances, as in the case of Tom, a small businessman from Massachusetts.
She's going to get elected because she's going to
cheat.
She's going to cheat. She's going to raise the taxes on everybody, and healthcare right now is crushing us anyway. So I'm concerned that we're going to have a tough time making ends meet.
Take that stupid hat off, man.
I will not take this hat off.
On the other side of the spectrum, the documentary also shows the concerns of minorities if Donald Trump won. Deutschmann says a year later, America remains deeply polarized across the same lines. He hopes that films like his, by humanizing the American electorate, can encourage dialogue. Penelope Poulou, VOA News.
How's it going? It's Saturday night, study hour. But first, time to catch up.
3-2 share.
Deja Sawyer is in her last year of college and waits on tables at a restaurant. But her life goals are on a ballot.
I plan on returning back home to St. Petersburg and running for city council in 2020-21. Then after that, I aspire to become the first African-American female mayor of the city of St. Petersburg.
To get prepared, Sawyer attended a ready-to-run training program.
Women know the world in a different way.
Here they learn campaign nuances. And the toughest task, fundraising.
Next time you go to a wedding, you're going to be like, here I am at a fundraiser.
I've had friends all my life tell me that I should run for office, and I've always had that little voice in the back of my head saying, no, you're not good enough. You're not qualified. Who would want to listen to you?
Females make up more than half of the U.S. population, yet just about 20% of all senators and representatives are female, and even fewer are women of color.
Greeting, Mr. Ramos. My name
In California, Aja Smith is trying to change that.
And I'm a congressional candidate for District 41.
Smith says money intimidates minority women. She's raised $10,000 with a goal of $100,000 by January. Smith is a military veteran running against an incumbent male Democrat who's never served in the military.
We are the largest employer in this area.
Smith says she looks more like her community than a traditional Republican, who she describes as a rich old white man. Halfway across the country in Naperville, Illinois, a woman who is another first-time politician making her run for Congress is Democrat Jennifer Zordani. As she watched the district's Republican congressman get more and more conservative,
I thought, am I going to keep complaining, or am I going to get out there and work?
First, she has to win the Democratic primary against this woman. Hi. And this woman.
Here's pajama time.
A bookstore owner and city councilwoman.
Right. I'm collecting signatures to get on the ballot. Thank you. I'll give you a little train reading. Thank you.
If she wins, Zordani would be the first woman to ever represent the voters of Illinois' 6th District.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thanks.
Nearly 400 women like Smith and Zordani are running for the U.S. Congress next year. If most of them win the primaries, many are looking at 2018 to be the year of the woman. Carolyn Pursuti, VOA News. I'm looking at Beth.
Traveling through western Texas, National Parks traveler Micah Meyer got a chance to immerse himself in American history.
I'm at Fort Davis National Historic Site, which is a military outpost that was used in the 1800s to help defend American interests in the West Texas Chihuahuan Desert.
The Chihuahuan Desert, which spans more than half of the border between Mexico and the U.S., covers much of West Texas, arguably a perfect place for a fort.
On one side, you see the high wall of rocks that could either protect or make more precarious the fort location. And on the other side, you see the vast open desert for which the military would be able to see their enemies coming for miles.
That could be why Fort Davis, established in 1854, is considered one of the best surviving examples of a military post in the American Southwest. The site also honors the Buffalo Soldiers. freed African-American slaves who joined the U.S. Army following the Civil War. They were called Buffalo Soldiers because Plains Indians thought the soldiers' hair resembled that of buffalo, an animal the Indians greatly revered. The Buffalo Soldiers stationed at Fort Davis served from 1867 to 1885, where they played a major role in the settlement and development of the American West. Their mission was to protect travelers and the mail on the San Antonio-El Paso Road and to support military operations to control hostile American Indians. Today, the National Park Service is sensitive to the plight of the Native Americans in and around that area at the time of the fort's existence, but is proud, nevertheless, to preserve this historic site as a lasting memorial to all the U.S. soldiers who faithfully served their country for almost half a century. Julie Tabo, VOA News, Washington.
It is a moment every aspiring baseball player strives for.
Gift Ngope is coming in on the double switch.
That first major league appearance.
This is what you've been working hard for all these years, and this is what you've dreamed for since you were a little kid.
For 27-year-old South African Gift Ngope, the dream came true with the Pittsburgh Pirates April 26th.
My heartbeat was very hard, and it felt like it was beating a little bit out of my chest.
Up against pitcher John Lester of the Chicago Cubs World Series championship team, Ngope did more than just step to the plate.
A nation and a ground single into center field for Gift Ngope.
He reached first base on a well-placed hit, entering the history books as the first Major League Baseball player born on the African continent, competing in a sport unfamiliar to many in South Africa.
Baseball is not very popular because we compete against 3 other sports, cricket, rugby, and soccer. So, you know, the youth development for baseball is not going to be as strong.
But Gift Ngope was born to baseball, literally. His mother worked for the South African Randburg Mets Baseball Club, and the family lived in a small apartment near the field.
I rolled out of bed and I was on first base, and that's how it was for me. I started playing baseball at the age of 3. I was throwing the ball against the wall, and the coach called me over and he was like, "Hey, you got a pretty good arm. Why don't you join the team?"
At 18, Ngope caught the eye of the Pittsburgh Pirates, who offered him a contract that brought him into the organization's minor league system, where he formed a friendship with fellow teammate Josh Bell.
Having the courage to make that first step, say, "Hey, I'm coming over to the States. I'm going to try to learn this game as best I can." It's incredible.
While Ngope is the first from Africa, he isn't alone.
Dovydas Neverauskas making his major league debut, the 24-year-old from Lithuania.
Just before his debut, the Pittsburgh Pirates called up Ngope's minor league teammate, Lithuanian-born pitcher Dovydas Neverauskas from the Indianapolis Indians, prepping him to take on the Chicago Cubs.
Got there during the game and I got to pitch in the game at the same time, so it was like, didn't really have time to think once I got to the field.
Now the first Lithuanian Major League Baseball player, Neverauskas understands the importance of his own historic moment.
Because if I do good, team's going to see there's some potential in Lithuania, and maybe send some people to look more, for more players.
His time with the Pirates lasted just 1 game.
Neverauskas' pitch right down the middle.
Neverauskas now waits for another chance in the minor leagues.
It's tough knowing that as you play today, there's another player and every organization trying to take your spot. I guess it makes it a little bit easier for us to just focus on winning and focus on the now. And I feel like Gift is a perfect example of that.
Gift Ngope remains with the Pirates for now and is exceeding even his own expectations.
It's been unbelievable for me. The story just keeps on growing bigger.
While Gift writes the next chapter, his younger brother Victor hopes to have his own storybook career. The 19-year-old is following in his brother's footsteps, also securing a contract with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and plays on a minor league team in Florida where he prepares for his chance to make it to baseball's biggest stage. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Cincinnati, Ohio.
An online restaurant that works with refugee chefs like Majid. Trained to cook in Syria and living in a state of constant war, his parents told him to leave.
I'm Jim Malone, and I work the political beat. I cover what drives the political issues in the United States, what voters think, what drives the candidates, how public opinion shifts on one issue or another. It keeps you in touch with the American people and where they want the country to go. It's a great way to get a window on what's happening in the United States. I'm Jim Malone, and my beat is U.S. politics.
This is Border Crossings. My name is Larry London, and I'll be your host for today's show as we welcome a music star from the 1980s, whose hits include Every Time I Think of You, Change, Back on My Feet Again, and of course, the #1 song, Missing You. John Waite's name might not be easily recognizable, but his smash hits and his unique vocal styling certainly are. From his days with Bad English and the Babies, to his own solo recordings, John Waite has toured with Ringo Starr and many other music giants. John's music has topped the U.S. and U.K. charts, and he's on tour today, and he joins us for a live performance and interview. Stay tuned for John Waite on today's Border Crossings.
I put my heart on hold.
Hi, this is Larry London. Welcome to Border Crossings, and what a great show we've got for you today. I'm very excited myself because I'm a fan of this man and his music over the years, going back as far as the 70s. And we welcome to D.C. and to Border Crossings and to the worldwide VOA audience, John Waite. Welcome to our studios.
Oh, it's great to be here, Larry. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to meet you in person. I have been playing your songs with the Babies and with Bad English for many, many years. And
so have I.
So have you. Probably many more times, I'm sure, than I have. But I love the songs. I love your music.
Thanks.
I love your sound and everything that you've been putting out. And are you on tour now for a new album?
There's a greatest hits called Best. And there's like 12 songs that span the whole career. Mm-hmm. That's just come out, that's in the shops. And we got one called Wooden Heart Volume 2, which is like a retrospective. It's an acoustic anthology. And Missing You's on there, Isn't It Time, some of the really big songs, and then some of the obscure songs from past albums that are acoustic. It's an amalgam of like new cuts and old cuts. But it's a beautiful record. It came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. It only took a day and a half to record the 6 songs that are on the 12 tracks. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was going in there to cut 4 tracks for an EP, because the Volume 1 was an EP. Mm-hmm. And it became 6 tracks, and then I just added these other tracks in, and it was this album. But it's like, it's Spartan, it's stripped down. Sometimes it's just me and one guitar. A lot of it is just me and one guitar. But it's got something that I didn't expect it to have, and it's really kind of an experience listening to it. It really surprises me. It happens so fast.
What's the vibe on the new album? I know you've kind of evolved over your career, and for a while it was rock, and then you did a little bluegrass, and you worked with Alison Krauss.
Yeah.
So, where's the new sound for these days?
Well, no, I started off on the acoustic. Mm-hmm. I really did. My cousin Michael Deegan is with the Temperance 7, which is a trad jazz band in England that were big in the 50s and stuff, but he's the banjo player. Mm-hmm. And when I was a kid, he was a painter who went to art school, but he'd play me Jimmy Rogers songs and Hank Williams and Big Bill Brunsey, and it all came from this national big acoustic guitar with a resonator, and then he would play like acoustic. But I grew up listening to that before I heard rock and roll. So when I look back to the key things that motivate me musically, it's always on the acoustic guitar. Even as far back as the Babies, the best songs were all written on the acoustic. And left to my own devices, I would play like country or folk or Celtic music or blues. But country blues, not so much electric blues like Chicago blues, it'd be Delta, you know? So it all comes from this. And as I got older, especially when I got out of Bad English, when that broke up, I went straight back to the acoustic. It was so natural. I was living in New York City, and the reason for playing the acoustic at that point, other than just I loved it, was that you couldn't make a lot of racket at 2 in the morning. You know, people would knock on the doors and you'd get evicted, you know, so I had the acoustic with me all the time. But it spoke to me, and it always has. And so at this point in my life, when I don't need to sort of do anything other than what I want to do, you know, this is what I'm doing now. It's just gone back to what I loved as a kid.
What's the name of the new album?
It's called Acoustic Anthology, Wooden Heart Volume 2.
Excellent. Well, and that leads me to believe there's going to be Volume 3.
Yeah,
4,
no,
5.
I mean, I'm already thinking about that. We got some downtime in November and December, and there's so many songs, you know. I mean, I got some of the songs that I want to recut from the Babies, like You. There's songs that are just beautiful songs I'd like to sort of update and just bring out without any orchestration or, like, backbeat. Just the acoustic, it speaks so truly, you know. I want to get back to that. And there's new songs I've written, and all of the new songs are like on the acoustic, but they're kind of rock songs. It's not like I'm country, but I'm influenced by country. The intention of country is like storytelling, and I've always had that. I've always been able to, like, tell a story in a song, and I didn't realize till recently that's where it came from. It's really an honest acquisition, you know. It's like something that happened to me as a kid. Cowboy songs, you know, Marty Robbins. They're all story songs, you know.
Right.
So the natural thing for me to do is tell stories. But it works on the acoustic, not so much on the electric.
Yeah, there's not many storytelling guitar-based bands these days. I mean, you know, you have an artist like Ed Sheeran, for example.
Yeah.
He tells stories, plays the guitar. So it's
you get
great.
it in country. You get it in country and you get it in bluegrass. But in rock's something else.
Yes.
Rock, unless you like Bob Seger, who can, like, and obviously Bruce Springsteen.
Right.
There are people that really
Bob
own
Dylan,
that.
the legends,
Bob Dylan, you know, I mean, Dylan's like you know, he's Dylan. There's only one Dylan, and he's the boss.
We've got John Waite in our studios on tour for album 11. And
is it?
I guess you're not counting anymore.
No, I was. I thought it was more like 20, actually.
It feels like it, huh?
No, it's 20. Oh, wow, the solo records, it's 11. But if you put Bad English in there and the
That's
Babies,
true.
it gets to like 20 or 21.
Yeah, and
it's
40
insane.
years, right? 40
yeah, more than
years.
40 years. I think somebody's trying to make me look good, but I said it's 40 years. It's more like 43 or something, you know?
Well, you look great.
Oh, thank you.
And introduce the guys in the band.
On the stool.
In the stool?
Yeah, we couldn't bring a drum kit. They couldn't fit it in. So we got him on a stool. This is Rondo, Michael Rondo Gillum. He's from New Jersey, and he's been with us for about 10 years. And here we have the man himself, the man in black. This on bass guitar from Philadelphia. We have Tim Hogan. And Mark Ricciardi, also the man in black, on the Martin D28. He's from Staten Island. So it's an East Coast band, really. And with my sort of New York history, it kind of like it jives, you know, we all sort of get on.
Now, what are you going to play for us first?
What would you like?
Anything you want to play.
Okay, we can play When I See You Smile.
Sometimes I wonder how I'd ever make it through this world without having you. I just wouldn't have a clue. see you smile. Oh yeah, baby. Oh, I can do anything, yeah. When I see you smile, baby. Baby, when I see you smile at me. Touch of your hand can do. It's like nothing that I ever knew before. And when the rain is falling, I don't feel it. You're here with me now. One look at you, baby. That's all I ever need. Yeah. When I see you smile, I can face the world. Oh, I can do anything, yeah. When I see you smile, see a ray of light. Oh, she's shining right through the rain. When I see you smile, baby. Baby, when I see you smile at me. Every day in my life. Alright. Smile at me, yeah.
Wow. Huge hit. John Waite. Great song. 1989, you co-wrote that with Diane Warren?
Yeah, Warren wrote that.
She wrote the song?
Yeah, yeah. Old friend of mine from way back.
Wow.
Yeah.
And where were you when you heard your song on the radio for the first time? You remember?
Me, I was on PCH with the babies. The top was down. We were going off to see Ronnie Wood from the Stones at Malibu Colony. And a mutual friend was going to take us over there to say hi. And we're driving up the PCH with the Pacific on the left and California on the right, and just blazing up PCH. It was an incredible thing, you know. I mean, it's like, I guess you think you've arrived when you hear your song on the radio. I mean, it's the first time.
Did you have to pull over to the side of the road?
No. We just sort of sat there and listened. I think when you hear it for the first time, nobody speaks. When the babies first came to America, we came down Sunset Boulevard, and there was a gigantic billboard over, just by Tower Records, not over Tower Records, but seeing a billboard with your name on it, that's something else. That's the same thing for me. It was the same memories that I have of LA and being in the babies, being a kid and being that successful. It was, it has a lot of impact. You know, you remember that, like a picture book, you know.
There's a big risk when you are in a big band like the Babies, and then you make a change to another band with a totally different name. And so what precipitated that? What caused you guys
Well, no, the Babies just broke up after 7 years. We'd really run our course. That was the end of it, really. I went back to England, got married. I kind of quit. And it was enough for me. I thought, well, I've made 5 records and I've had a good time, and I'm, you know, I'm not even 30. It's kind of like it was a great time to say goodbye. And I don't know whether they felt the same way, but I'd definitely given it everything I could. I went back to England, bought a small cottage in the country, got married, settled down. And then I started to miss New York, which was kind of weird because I'm living in the countryside. You know, it's like, you know, all creatures great and small. You know, it really was. It was the Lake District and small, beautiful little village in Sedbergh, near Kendal. And 2 lawyers got me out of a record deal. And I went to LA to meet EMI, and they signed me to this really good deal. And I didn't go home for about 3 months. It was like one of those things. I started to write the record, and it happened. It happened so quick. I'd had such like time off that by the time I hit the ground again, I was not just running, I was racing. You know, I was really understood what I wanted to do, and I was no longer with this other record company. And the new record company actually liked what I was doing, you know. So, and man, it happened so quickly, you know. And instead of just doing like some work, meeting a few guitar players, signing the deal and going home, I had to stay in America and finish it, which leads us into Missing You, because at the 11th hour, we were mixing the record. They had this great band, Donny Nosov on bass, Gary Myrick on guitar, and Curly Smith on drums. It was a tragically great band. And we'd blazed through this record, written a lot of stuff together, but I knew we hadn't got a big single. I just knew it, and there was something missing. It's like making a jigsaw puzzle, and there's a piece missing, and everybody's looking at the jigsaw going, yeah, it's great, isn't it? You're going, yeah, but there's a piece missing, and nobody got it. And I was going away while David Thorner was mixing, and I was trying to write something else, and I didn't even know what. And a friend of mine had this backing tape. We were working on this song in his studio, and I'm in the bedroom with singing on this mic, and he's got a studio in his living room, and we were trying to find this tape we'd been working on for this song. We couldn't find it. It kept stopping the tape machine, and he hit the button at the wrong time, and this backing track came up, and I said, what's that? He said, oh, it's just, I'm just, you know, it's nothing, I just did it last night. And it was like boom, dun, 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 dun. And I thought, no, that's right up my street, that. What do you got? So he put that up on the headphones and the mic, and I went back in the bedroom microphone situation and sang the first verse chorus of Missing You without missing a beat. And that's what I was saying about, like, knowing there's a piece missing. Your subconscious is working all the time. I haven't been back to New York. I haven't been home to see my wife. And I'm really kind of feeling it. And Missing You came out, you know, and on that microphone, in that moment, after the first chorus, I choked. You know, it was like everything I've been walking towards in my life happened in that moment. And I knew that it was number one, and I knew my life would never be the same again. And that's, you know, true story.
Can you do Missing You? Would you do this? Great.
We can.
This is the song that knocked What's Love Got to Do with It.
Yeah,
Tina Turner, right off the chart.
Turner.
Knocked her right off the
My
throne.
heroine. I just, you know, it was, and I got to meet her the week before.
Oh boy!
At a party, and I leant over and I said, you know, I'm number one next to you.
That's right.
You know, what a way to say hello to Tina, you know. But she was very gracious, you know.
Wow, fantastic. Missing You, John Waite.
Every time I think of you, I always catch my breath, and I'm still standing here, and you're miles away, and I'm wondering why you left. And there's a storm that's raging through my frozen heart tonight. I hear your name in certain circles, and it always makes me smile. I spend my time thinking about you, and it's almost driving me wild. And it's my heart that's breaking down this long distance line tonight. I ain't missing you at all since you've been gone away. I ain't missing you at all. No matter what my friends might say, there's a message in the wire, and I'm sending you the signal tonight. You don't know how desperate I've become, and it looks like I'm losing this fight. In your world, I have no meaning, though I'm trying hard. what my heart might say. There's a message that I'm sending out, like a telegraph to your soul. And if I can't bridge this distance, stop this heartbreak on below, I ain't missing you at all. Since you've been gone away, I ain't missing you at all. No matter what my heart might say, I ain't missing you at all. I can lie to myself these days, I ain't missing you. I ain't missing you. I ain't missing you at all. I can lie to myself these days. I ain't missing you.
Woo! They're cheering around the world. John Waite, Missing You. What a huge, huge mega hit.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, was that the highlight for you in the career?
Well, yeah, I was living in New York before that, and I was kind of living on 72nd Street in a crash pad, you know, sleeping on the floor on a mattress and stuff. Times were pretty tough. And I got to know all the neighbors and the old ladies on the street and the newspaper sellers. I was a New Yorker, you know. And then when I came back to New York, I'd go up there and see these people, and they were kind of real proud of me, and it was kind of, I really felt validated with that. It wasn't so much the #1 thing or the success, it was like being in New York, and 6 months before, I was living off like $200 a week in New York, you know, it's kind of tough. And then I was sort of like, you know, top of my game, really. But the thing that really touched me was that, the transition from being, and they were kind of like really proud of me and pleased. And I really took that to heart. I thought that was really kind of wonderful, you know, and the rest of it was great too.
Right.
When you're #1, you always get a good table in a restaurant.
And no sleeping on the floor anymore.
No, well, it was a mattress, but it was pretty funky, you know, it was like Me and the Roaches, you know, it was pretty serious.
Now, you guys chose the name Bad English.
Yeah.
And right at a time when there was a band called Modern English.
Well, you know, I never thought of that, but it was meant to be the spin you put on a ball when you're playing pool. You put like good English on, so it's kind of a, you know, it's one of those names, but English is what you put on a ball when you, and I'm English and I'm bad, and that's what we call it, Bad English. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things we're all trying to like agree on something, you know, and it was difficult, and we're all kicking in such a lot. It didn't really matter who came up with it, as long as it sort of looked good in print. So and we got away with it. You know, we had a lot of success for like 2.5, 3 years.
And you worked with a couple of guys who went on to be in Journey, John McCain, Neil Schon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what a great career you've had. You also worked with Ringo Starr.
Yeah, Ringo. Yeah, I was in the All-Stars for like, I don't know, 7 weeks, which is kind of strange. You know, I mean, I used to be a bass player when the Babies started. And I used to be pretty good, but when you put the bass down, you're not playing guitar all the time. You have to relearn the instrument. And you know, the opening night in Canada, you know, it was nerve-wracking. We went in there and rehearsed for like 2 weeks, and then you're on. And there was Colin Hay and Sheila E. and Paul Carrack, some major songwriters, you know, in that band. So there was songs that were like Spanish, you know, hip-hop dance, super hip, sort of like Sheila E. songs. Then there was this beautiful Paul Carrack songs that were soulful. He's a great singer, keyboard player. And Colin Hay's stuff, which is almost like reggae. So you had to learn all those songs, you know, and then play your own songs. And, you know, I looked down and he said, and now here he is, Ringo Starr, and the curtains go up, you know, and I looked down at the bass, and I'm playing this bass, and I swear to God, it went from being a bass guitar into this sort of like object with steel strings on it, and I didn't know one end of it from the other. I mean, it was like, you know, looking at it going like, where do I begin, you know?
Pleasure to talk to you. I know you got one more song for us.
Have we?
Yep, one more. John Waite's here.
2, 3, 4. Talking and they say mistake. Oh, we always wish for money. We always wish for fame. We think we've got the answers, baby. But some things don't ever change. It doesn't matter who you are. Change what's in your heart. Change blowing through your world every single day. Change, yeah, yeah, yeah. Meet the new boss. Same as the old boss now. And we won't get fooled again. No way. We won't get fooled again. No way. Meet the new boss. Like the old boss, yeah. We won't get fooled again. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Woo! Great! Wow! 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 Wow!
Thank you, people. We got
John
like
Waite.
an audience here.
You got your audience. You got your fans around the world. Those
Yeah.
you can see and those you can't see. And people have been buying your records.
New York, man. Yeah.
Supporting your music. And what an honor it is to have you in our
Well, I
studios.
really enjoyed it.
So tell me, John, your album name again, the new
It's
album?
called Wooden Heart Volume 2, Acoustic Anthology. There's a Volume 1 that's only 4 tracks. That's an EP. This one's got, I think, 12 or 14 songs. I forget. But it's really, I mean, honestly, I think it's some of the best things I've done, certainly as a singer, and being able to choose some of those songs and bring them back, like Missing You. Isn't It Time by the Babies, you know, but just unplugged.
Right.
In God's Shadow, that I wrote with Keith Reed from Procol Harum. Just some beautiful. I mean, I like them, but I mean, it's a joy. You know, I mean, you know, you get older, and it's a joy to sort of look back at your career and do the stuff that you love so much, and it still have impact. It means a lot to me.
Well, what a pleasure to have you here. Thank you, John, for doing this.
God
Thank
bless
you,
you
guys.
No, you know,
Great
thank
band.
you for having us. We
You know.
really appreciate it.
Can't wait to have you back.
Thank you.
John Waite, our guest, and you're watching Border Crossings. I'm Larry London.
VOA presents the following National Geographic program as we continue to explore the world around us.
The Sami are by tradition reindeer herders that have lived as nomads. Everything revolved around reindeer. The food, the children, the stories, everything. Herders were working so in tandem with nature that they could interpret the Arctic to the rest of the world. The Sami people had their own voice and their own way to tell the world who they were. I'm going to open tonight with a journal entry. November 2010, reindeer herd separation, Lusatjatsa, Norway. I'm not ready to leave this place. The longer I stay, the more it suits me. The land is like a magnet. A person can either repel or connect to this landscape. I woke up this morning and the lava closest to ours revealed it had snowed all night. It was covered like a white sugar almond that one might have received as a wedding favor. But as this world becomes more real to me, the other fades away. I came here to find people if when the land speaks could interpret its language. I came here in search of silence so that I could begin to hear again. I am now more a stranger in my own home than here. So tonight I want to take you to the Scandinavian Arctic, where I encountered the Sami people. The Sami are by tradition reindeer herders that have lived as nomads. Today they're considered the indigenous group of Europe. To create this body of work, I lived there for 4 years and worked as a biga. A biga is a woman in Sami culture that would go and live with a family of reindeer herders. She would help with the children, she would help cook and clean. She would also travel with the herders when they were with the reindeer. She would help slaughter the reindeer and basically anything that needed to be done. But first, let's watch a small video. This ran with my article in 2011.
Porukka pohtakalti maalalle karasta tuotta. Karasta muotta. Koko porukka lähti tiimaalla. Tällä vasa auki. Joo, ei mun täällä tiehtänyt. Se on ollut. Lämpö lähdette voikin vähän voinnasti.
So, the Sami homeland is called Sápmi, but maybe many people here have heard it referred to as Lapland. It ranges today in 4 countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. But the majority of my work was done in Norway and Sweden, where you see the gray dots, Jokkmokk, Järvari, Haro, and Gourtegeno. Today there's approximately between 80,000 to 100,000 Sami, but only 10% of them are actively involved in reindeer herding. So, my journey began in 2007. I had a few email correspondence with a Sami woman. I wrote her a letter and said I was interested in learning about traditional medicine in the Arctic landscape. And she invited me to come and stay with her for several weeks. And so I did. And when I got there, she made a few things really clear to me. One was that the Sami people had their own voice and their own way to tell the world who they were. They didn't need someone coming from the outside and telling them who they were. And the other was, but if you want to learn who we are, then you need to stay here for a long time. And I said, well, you know, I worked on my last project over 8 years. And she said, well, that's great. And so kind of set the scene for this. So she said, why don't you go visit my husband? He's a reindeer herder. And she goes, but I think he's hunting moose right now. And she drew a map on a napkin. And she said, just follow this map and you'll find him. And so, okay. So I drove about an hour to a railroad tracks. That was like the main marker on the map. I drove to the railroad tracks and put on my backpack and parked the car, put on the backpack, and I walked another 3 miles until I found this house. And to me, this house was the middle of nowhere. And this is Arnold, and he's slicing dried reindeer meat at the table. But this was the first thing I noticed on the wall. There was just this picture, and I really had no idea what it was and what was happening. And I would truly have no idea of the deep significance of this event for another 1.5 years. But it was the only thing on the wall, so I figured intuitively it must be important. And it's a reindeer calf that's being marked in the ear. The ear mark shows the ownership. And in Scandinavia today, the majority of reindeer are owned. And at that time, I didn't speak Sami language, and Arl didn't speak English, so we had to find ways to communicate. And the first thing he did was come up to me and he had me smell his watch band. He kind of put it up to my nose and I said, oh, and it smelled like you just slaughtered an animal. And that was his way of saying, well, you know, we actually did shoot a moose. Why don't you come out and we'll show it to you? I said, okay. So we walked up and I followed and this is what I saw. And I said, oh, finally, like, I feel really comfortable. This is what I came to look for. And instantly just made some gestures, and he was with his nephew, and they were telling me to collect some wood to see if I could build a fire. And so that, again, set the stage that not only would I be here for an extended period of time, but that I would be needing to make myself useful. It wasn't that the Sami people needed my help by any means, but they really also didn't need someone standing around doing nothing. About a year later, I followed Arld to his summer grounds, and this is a calf marking. And this is one of the most important times in the Sami herding year, as it projects the prosperity of the herd for the families for the years to come. And what's happening here is you see the female reindeers running in circles. The herders are watching their ear marks, and they'll watch as the calves following, and then they'll lasso those calves and mark the ears. And that's how this continues, this tradition. And that fall, I followed Arl's daughter, Suna. This is during the fall slaughter. And I took notice of a few of the women were collecting the blood after the reindeers were slaughtered, and they'd sit there and stir it for about an hour. And I asked her what they were doing. She said, we collect the blood. We can either dry it or we'll freeze it, and this will be later used in cooking. And when I began to work as a biga, this is one of the first things I did was learn how to cook. I cooked many dishes with blood, but my favorite was blood pancakes. The first year and a half, though, I went back and forth from New York to Sapmi, trying to find ways to stay there, get visas, how I could live in one person's home, just logistically how this was going to work. When I would go back and forth, I thought of the images I was making as impressions, my impressions of what I was seeing there. And this reindeer skin hanging on the side, this is a site of a shed, but there would be houses. Every kind of Sami village just had skins and skins on houses after house after house. And I'd later find out that these skins could be sold, but also they could be used on the snowmobiles to kind of keep warm. They'd wrap around the snowmobiles, or they'd put them on the floor of the lava, which was that first structure you saw in the first slide that I showed. And this is Lila, the woman that invited me with Suna, her daughter. And of course, I was taken by the visual beauty of their traditional dress, which is called a gokti. But in time, I learned that it had deeper significance. The gokti would tell an outsider exactly where they were coming from, what village they were coming from. But even more so, it could tell you what family they belonged to. And if you really knew what you were doing and you looked close enough, you could tell who sewed the gokti. I later learned that if a Sami miner got in trouble, if a picture went in the newspaper, no part of the gokti could be shown as well as the face. It would be like identifying the person. And this is Ellie. She's the niece of Arld and Lila. She's from Jokkmokk, and she's a reindeer herder. I was struck by this luminescent quality she had. But I was also taken by her scarf, and I had no idea if it was Swedish or Sami. And she said to me, oh, of course it's Sami. And she said, you know, we wear it on our traditional gokti, but when we're in our street clothes, and I call it street clothes, she didn't call them that, but you know, when we wear it in our everyday clothes, it's called Sami inspired. And finally, I made my way to Gotegeno. Gotegeno is considered it's just, if you want to say, sort of the Sami capital. 98% of the people speak Sami language. And Lila took me there to meet her extended relatives. And this is where I ended up meeting Niels Peter and Ingrid Gaup. And it was them that I worked for as the biga. And Niels Peter comes from a long lineage of reindeer herders. My initial question, were there people that could interpret nature's landscape? And not only did the Sami language itself have deep, deep and rich vocabulary to describe the natural world, but herders were working so in tandem with nature that, in fact, they could interpret the Arctic to the rest of the world. Another thing in this image, I think it was the first time I had experienced where I could see no horizon line. I just kept looking around, and it was like you couldn't, the focal point was this. And this is Niels Peter and Ingrid's main house. And I say main house because many herders have a house in their summer grounds and a house in their winter grounds where the reindeer are in the summer, where the reindeer are in the winter, and then they have a main house. And this is where I mostly lived and worked. And one day I had been out all day, most likely with the herd and with Niels Peter, and I came in and I saw this sitting on the table, and I thought, okay. And they told me it was so cold outside that they couldn't cut the meat up outside. It was freezing, so they had to bring it in. So of course I run downstairs and I get my camera, I come back up, and everyone's laughing. They're like, oh my gosh, again, she's taking pictures. This is every day. What is she taking a picture of? And so I was like, I have to get this picture. Okay. And then about a year later, I came across the same scene. I had been out all day, probably with the reindeer, and I came in, and the calf was sitting on the table, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I've got to get some food. I've been out all day, and I made myself some soup, and I sat down, and I started eating. And Ingrid raced and got her camera, and she came back, and she took this picture, and she said, well, now you're a part of the everyday. I think it felt really good, but at the same time it made me think, wow, what's my perspective now? What does that mean? And then I realized that I could make pictures like this. That's what it meant. This is Niels Peter and his herding dog Gideon. And for them, this is what would be considered the ultimate herder's perspective. You can see the entire herd in the background. You can see what weather's coming in, if there's reindeer missing, if there's predators, if there's food. But 3 years before, I wanted to be as close as possible to the reindeer. I wanted to be as close as possible to the people. I wanted to capture their face. I would never have taken a picture like this. And also, probably I wouldn't have been in a position to be here to see this. And as I studied more and learned more about Sami artwork, when a herder would paint, and in Kautokeino, like I said, 98% of the people speak Sami, so I was surrounded with it all the time. But there's also something called Sami Alaskola, or Sami University. And I took a 7-month immersion course. And Sami were put in boarding schools, and many generations lost their language. So this school kind of gives this back to the generations that have lost it. But I also took it, and finally, I could sit in a lavabo like this. And this is when I began to understand the history and learn about the culture, because grandparents, extended family, aunts, uncles, children were all sitting in this lavabo and telling stories in Sami, and drinking coffee and eating dried reindeer meat. And they weren't being translated into English, and if they were, they really lost the significance. So finally, I could hear and feel these stories. And this is Matti Skalp. It's Niels Peter's brother, and they work with their herds together. And for me, pictures like this are important because I didn't take very many of them. A lot of my work is kind of silent and still, and more reflections on the moments. But it would be a real disservice to take away what hard work reindeer herding is. It's all year long. There's no vacations. If a herder takes vacations, it's usually to visit extended family members and help them with their herd. They're often working in -30, -40, -50. It's not a lot of money. This is a lifestyle. One side note, I was at a family party, and this guy, Mattis, walks in. His entire face is frostbite. It's just brown and kind of peeling away. And nobody blinked. It's just me. I was like, wow. It was just came in. He'd been out with the reindeer for a few weeks. So, and one spring I got to follow the Galps on their spring migration. The spring migration is probably about 200 to 250 kilometer trek from the winter grazing grounds north to the summer grazing grounds. It can take anywhere from a few days or a few weeks depending on the weather. And in this situation, the weather would get a little bit bad, so they would stop. Sometimes they would pitch the lavabo and we could sit for 15 or 20 hours. Or sometimes they just take a break like this for an hour and go to sleep. And this is how I saw the herd on that migration. And again, I just remember the migration itself is very meditative, just kind of going and going, and you don't see very much, you just see the herd. And I saw this and I realized, wow, my only focal point are reindeer. And that extended to many years. It wasn't just today and this time and in that moment. I realized I had been living in a bubble of reindeer for like years. And in the best way. I mean, everything revolved, with the herding families that I lived with, everything revolved around reindeer. The food, the children, the stories, everything had to do with reindeer. And this picture is really important to me because this is Niels Peter sitting with his herd. And actually today the herds are a lot more wild than they used to be because of things like snowmobiles and helicopters, which a lot of herders use. They're not physically with the herds the way they used to be. They used to ski with the herds or walk with the herds, so the herd was more tame. So for him to sit and have the herd kind of circling around him, it means he's been with his herd every single day. And then he sat there and he began to yoik. And yoik is that sort of throaty chant you heard in the video I showed at the beginning. And the yoik it's very special to the Sami. It's a way to pay reverence to a person, place, or thing. And he sat down and he began to yoik his wife, which means he's evoking her presence in the herd. And this is his wife, Ingrid. And she took me under her wing when I was there. And she showed me what a woman's role was in a reindeer herding family. And the role is to be the heart and soul of the family. And that's what she was. And just like Arnold in the very beginning that had me build a fire, Ingrid did the same thing. She had me cook. If she went out to cut grass, which she's doing here, I would go out and cut grass. And she's cutting grass. It'll later be dried. It'll be put in shoes in the wintertime. And she swears this is warmer than synthetic material. And this is skin, reindeer skin. And Ingrid taught me how to work with skin, how to take the hair off, how to dry it, how to later make a bark concoction which would preserve the skin, and then also how to sew with it. When I was 6 months pregnant, I went back and we sewed shoes for my son, which is a tradition. And these are not my son's shoes. But these are reindeer shoes, but this has the hair on it. So these would be shoes that are used in the winter. These are for female, and these would be for a fancy, very dressy occasion. It would be used with the gopti. But the style of the toe being curled up would be on men or women's shoes, and it comes from the old days when they used to lock into the skis with it. This is Ellen Ingrid. This is the granddaughter of Niels Peter and Ingrid. And this would be like similar to a Native American cradle board. And you can see here the wood's been covered with this skin that's finally been preserved by the bark. A lot of the women today use these for the children. And this is Ingrid and her youngest daughter, Sarah, in a Daawo, and this is during their calf marking. And I followed them. We were here for a couple weeks. We set up the Daawo and we went inside, and you can see those skins that I showed you in the beginning on the shed. They're on the ground, they're sitting. They set up the fireplace and she cooked coffee. And she sat down and all she said to me, she said, "This is home. This is what home is." This is Johan. He's a young herder from Sweden, and I spent a couple of weeks with him. And I asked him, "What is herding to you? What are you going to do? What are you going to be?" And he said, "Herding is everything. I've learned this from my uncles. I've learned it from my aunts. I've learned it from my mother. I am a reindeer herder. But to be a reindeer herder today, it's very, very difficult. I won't be able to just be a reindeer herder. I will have to take another job. Just the cost of the gas and in the equipment. Reindeer herding is an economic way of life. It's regulated by the EU. But what he was telling me is that young reindeer herders, they can continue, but they will have to take other work. And this is Sven. I spent a lot of time with Sven. He came to visit me in New York. He's 70. He's been reindeer herding his entire life. And I'm going to end on another journal entry. Today we came across 2 women reindeer that while fighting locked horns. Unable to unlock, they starved to death. I watched Sven as he approached the scene. He seemed forlorn and lost in thought. I only took a few pictures. It struck me how a man close to 70 that had been a reindeer herder his entire life could be so sad. I could only imagine how many reindeer he had slaughtered in his lifetime, and that this cycle of life and death would seem so natural. When I asked him, he said that they had suffered. He estimated it took them 3 days or so to die of starvation and cold, and this is what bothered him. He looked at the earmark to see whom they belonged to. One was his and one was his cousin. He separated their locked horns, cut them off, and brought them home to give as a keepsake. Thank you.
VOA, exploring the world around us.
When National Parks traveler Micah Meyer visited Everglades National Park, he says he got a good idea of what southern Florida looked like before it was developed.
Everglades was really fascinating because it's this huge section of land when compared to a lot of national parks. I mean, it takes up like the entire southwestern corner of Florida. Essentially, before human interaction, everything south of Orlando looked like the Everglades.
On the raised boardwalk of the Anhinga Trail, Micah had unparalleled views of what's called the River of Grass.
It's a marshland with a bunch of trees, and so there's all these birds everywhere that make it their home. We saw terrapin turtles. There's gators, sunning on the banks. Easily the most amount of wildlife I've seen in one place at one time.
Another highlight for Micah and his travel companion Angie Waldron was wading through knee